Okay, so what is this concept, MVP, minimal viable product? MVP is the simplest version of a product that can be made available to users. You put in the user's hand to validate a business idea. That's what MVP is. I will give you quite a few examples, and I'll use metaphors to talk about MVP. The first one, the cake and the cupcake. When I did my master thesis back in 1999, long ago, we used to talk that we are developing things on layers. Back on the days was only relational database. Object-oriented was like the main thing, like Java and all the object-oriented languages. And then we were developing for the internet, which is mainly event-driven. So my thesis was about a 3-layer architecture. So when I got to US and we start running inceptions, agile inceptions, I would call, I still use the metaphor of a cake, but things have changed from the traditional to the more agile. Traditionally, we would try to understand the whole cake, design the cake with those 3-layer architectures, and then implement the cake for 6 months, a year, and then deliver the cake. With the agile methodologies, we still were building cakes. I was still facilitating inception to understand what is this overall cake, but we're agile. Then we would plan the releases and deliver user story by user story, and you say a user story is like a thin slice of the cake. Therefore, some people could taste the cake even before it's all done. That was for me the agile way of doing things before Lean Startup. When Lean Startup come along and I start facilitating the Lean inceptions, not only the inceptions, I get all confused, because even though I want to have the vision of the cake, I'm not building cake. I'm building like cupcakes. And I like here the metaphor of a cupcake, because a cupcake, it's really small. You have the vision of the cake, but the cupcake is something small. But you don't build only one cupcake. You might build 1, 2, 3 of different flavors. Why? Because you put it in front of the users to figure out which flavor the user like the most. So you decide, I will keep on evolving this thing with this flavor because that's what my users want. And another thing about the cupcakes, that the cupcake, each cupcake has the cherry on top. It's not like you only put the cherry when the cake is complete. Every single cupcake has a cherry. It's desirable, it's beautiful. The customer loves it as much as the cake, even though it's not a complete project. So that's the idea of the cupcake as MVP. What usually happens with me, and this happens like almost every other week that I'm facilitating a Lean Inception, I go to a client. No one invites you and the engineering team to say, hey, let's run an inception to figure out a cupcake. No, they invite you, I need an inception because I know I need a cake. Or in this other metaphor, I need a tractor to cut grass. We need an inception because I do need a tractor to cut grass of Hamburg. There are a lot of grass in Hamburg in springtime. We're going to sell a lot of tractors to cut grass. So when you run an inception, a Lean inception with that group, not an inception, a Lean inception. Why? Because you want to align people about what is the MVP. Most likely you come up with MVP that's like a scissor or something much simpler to cut grass. Why? Because with this, you can validate your main business hypothesis. Is there like, if I build this thing to cut grass, will anyone buy it? Maybe they're going to say, I don't want to buy, I want to rent. Or I don't even want to rent. I want someone to come here, use that thing and cut my grass. Or even, do we really have grass to be cut? Maybe there's no grass. Maybe you took too long that the grass now are huge trees, or they're plastic grass, you don't need this. And like you had information that misleaded you. So that's the thing about MVP. It's about validating a business hypothesis. Therefore, you don't spend a lot of time building the overall vision, and you build something what? Minimal, the minimal viable that you can validate your business hypothesis. And you keep on evolving your product increment. So you go from hypothesis, either on the Leanception, you build this plan. Oh, I'm sure they're going to use the Caesar, and then let me think what's the next increment and the next increment. Or most like what's happening today with the Leanceptions, you do have the vision of the tractor to cut grass, but you figure out what is the MVP and a few increments after that, and that's it. Why? Because once you put this MVP in the hands of the users, they're going to give you feedback, and that feedback is more valuable than what you think they're going to say. So here they say, oh, I have back pain, and then you're going to switch, or the next product increment is something else that doesn't give back pain. And maybe you evolve your product until you have that vision, which usually is not the case. Usually you don't reach exactly the vision you have in early inception. You reach something much better that reaches what your customers really want. I'll give you more examples because this concept is very important. And I know that you need to go back to your company and convince people, hey, we need to be working on the MVP style. Therefore, I need to give you a few more examples. Two amazing examples, right? And it's always good to get the example of someone that was very successful. First, the Apple. Steve Jobs, a perfectionist. Everybody knows, like, working with Steve Jobs was not easy. I have a friend that was on his team when he delivered iPhone. Look what he did with the iPhone delivery. iPhone, it was an MVP. There were proof of concepts before, but the first iPhone that came out, it was an incomplete product. They had a vision for everything they want on iPhone, but that first one was an MVP, was incomplete, but was like a cupcake. What was incomplete about it? The App Store, which was a huge thing, it was not ready. The only apps that were running on the first iPhone were internal Apple apps. Even though they have released how the apps would work, the whole platform was not ready. But he was able to measure the interest if people were interested in building apps for the Apple platform. He was able to measure if people would use the new interface with the fingers. He was able to measure if people want to share pictures. He was validating a lot of hypotheses with that iPhone, which was very incomplete. For example, there was a copy-paste bug, and this colleague of mine that worked there asked him, we need 3 more weeks because of the firmware time to release to all devices again. He did not wait, even though it was a huge bug. He could not do copy-paste. Was he wrong, Steve Jobs? When someone tells your project, no, I want the whole thing, I don't want the MVP. You need those comparisons. Say, look, Steve Jobs didn't wait and iPhone is a huge success. You have to understand that MVP, it is the thing you put on the hands of the users to get some learning, but you keep on incrementing and augmenting that product. Let's switch to another example. You might have heard about this site, thefacebook.com. Yeah, it was a very simple site. I was a developer back in those days, very simple to do something like this. You use a simple framework with a very simple UI. I could do a UI like this, that nothing. But what he did, in one Saturday, he built something. He did not release to the whole world. He shared only with his colleagues from software engineering in MIT, only the classmates. He copied the email address of his colleagues on the database of Facebook and sent an email to them. Hey, do you want to share the picture from last weekend party? And he measured how would people behave about this new idea. And then he did build, measure, learn cycle. And then he shared with everybody that had an email on the database from software engineers. Then he met a student, by coincidence, is a Brazilian, Eduardo, that was studying economics. And then they compared if economics people would behave as like software engineering people. And then they shared the same thing with those 2 different types of users. And then they opened to everybody that had an email at MIT.com. They didn't need to control and have in the database anymore. They only controlled the email domain. And then they did this with MIT and Harvard to verify it's something only specific to this city. Let's write 2 colleges. And then they opened to all the colleges in the US, only controlling the domain. And then colleges in the US and colleges in Europe. Several build, measure, learn cycles. In fact, when I was in ThoughtWorks Brazil, I did run a lean inception for Facebook in Brazil for one feature within Facebook. Super easy, because until today, they think about what is the minimal viable thing, how we're going to open it to a small crowd and then bigger crowd until it opens to everybody else. That's the main idea on MVP. Another example that I want to give, because I am Brazilian, EasyTax. This is 2011, when I started with Inception. I was very involved on the startup weekends. Vinicius and Thales, they got 2nd place on the startup weekend. They got like 500 bucks reais, like less than now 70 euros, 60 euros. He could not quit their job. What did Vinicius do, which was the technical person? He wrote easytax.com.br. They got the domain, website only. We call a tax for you. What's your name? What's the address? What's your phone number? And a button, call the taxi now. That button was HTML code mail to Vinicius with that information. And then they got those $70, bought into Bing AdWords for everyone in one small neighborhood that would search for a co-op, tax co-op phone number. With this, they validated the MVP, they got the learning, they got the insights, build, measure, learn, build the next version. The next one pivoted a few times. To pivot is change directions based on the learning you got from the real usage. So that's the main idea. You have, it's either a new idea or feature ideas within a product or existing product or a legacy system. You want to build something. What is that? Get a group of people, align on what is that about. That's the MVP. Put in the hands of the final users to decide we continue this direction. We pivot because the data show us we're not wrong, but there's some learning. Let's switch the strategic direction, or we cancel. The data show us our strategy was totally off. But what about the minimum viable? That word is very important. Like, I don't want to use too many different words, minimal lovable, minimal testable. For me, it's like, it's all about the same concept. We all want the same thing. But there's something about viability. I'll give you yet another example. That one's even easier to correlate to digital projects. If you were to build a bridge, let's say you're going to build a bridge in a river here close to Madrid, where I'm living right now, an engineer would come and would make all the calculus and say, oh, we're going to build a huge bridge here and everybody's going to cross. In digital products, we're going to build a bridge. Yes, we do have digital architects or architects of information, this kind of people. What do they say? Oh, I think the bridge is here. Maybe the business person is going to say, oh, I think the bridge should be there because it's going to give me more money for this market. Whatever is the reason, put a few wood beams on different places and measure where are people crossing more. That's where you should build a bridge. That's the MVP. The MVP main idea is not to allow everybody to cross. It's to get learning for you to make a better informed decision. And then you go to the next product increment or MVP if you want to call. Now it's a little bigger. More people can cross at the same time. Maybe a bicycle, a motorbike can cross. And then you go to the next increment. Those are product increments, but they should go on the build, measure, learn cycle. And then this happens. No, this cannot happen. What is the problem here? Well, in this region, there are truck drivers and they want to cross the bridge. When it was a little small bridge, they cannot cross. Now that they see a car going through, guess what? They're going to go through as well. So if your bridge cannot handle like 5 tons, cannot handle a weight of vehicles from that region, it's a problem of your bridge. So that's not an MVP that allows this to happen. So for this to be MVP, have something that don't allow this to happen. I don't want to talk about the engineer solution, but the people that know the users, they should know that, hey, there are truck drivers here and the truck weighs 5 tons. If the bridge don't handle this weight, engineers figure out, do something. And the business people should be concerned because if the bridge breaks, guess what? It's your brand that's going down with the bridge. So yes, the MVP should consider the business perspective, the user experience perspective, and the technology part behind it, the engineer part behind it. So the MVP, it's on that magical intersection there. What's valuable to the business, usable or lovable by your users, and feasible that the engineers can do that minimum thing. The MVP is there. But it's hard to find that intersection. When you go to build your cupcake, you cannot build first what's feasible and this and this and this. And at the end, you have the wow factor like the iPhone. Since the beginning, it's like a cupcake. The cherry needs to be there. The experience of the iPhone got to be amazing, even though the product is incomplete. So when you think, plan, and release and put the MVP in the hands of your final users, it must have all those factors: feasible, valuable, usable, and wow. You must have the wow factor. Why? It is an incomplete product. So I don't care you're giving complete product. Like I'm giving a cupcake, I know the person wants to buy a wedding cake, but I'm giving a cupcake, but that cupcake got to bring the wow factor. So my user, my client come back to me and say, yes, I want more. And give you insight on how to increase, how to augment your product. I used to be a developer. So it's very hard because when you think about the MVP, you're thinking about the overall cake, the product solution. You got to think about the internal architecture. I know it's very hard because you think about the overall architecture, but you cannot build it because you're releasing only a cupcake. But the way you release it, it's not like on this, oh, I'm going to release a few internal components. No, you got to release a thin slice of your solution. That's the cupcake. Even though the internal architecture, it's still incomplete. But yes, that's MVP. The architecture goes hand in hand with the MVP evolution. And from the business side, thanks God there's business people because they think of, okay, how we're going to run a business based on the evolution of this thing we're working on together. You cannot just prove like business all has a kind of sales funnel or some sort of funnel that brings revenue to the company or recurring revenue, which is even more important. You cannot only figure out one layer. Like I did run a few inceptions to clients where they're like, "Whoa, amazing. We got 10,000 downloads per week." And that was about it. Why? We did not prove the whole funnel. What we need to do is like, and that's what I ask from the business people involved on the inceptions. Let us figure out how can we have this MVP to help validate the business hypothesis. It's not how many people download. It's like from all those that download, how many have used and are referring our product, even though we're not making enough money yet, but the results prove us we're going in a good direction. Okay, so how to decide this is the MVP? It's really hard. You have those three different perspectives, business, user experience, and technology. It's hard. Each one's pointing in a different direction. I'll tell you, as a technologist, I'll tell you, oh, I need the Inception to be very technical because it's a very technical product and I want to have all technical activities. That's a Inception from a technical point of view only. Well, the business person is going to say, oh, I need OKR sessions, and you figure out all the OKRs, tell the results and go and build it. And I know what's the MVP. And the person representing the final user will tell you, I know exactly, I did the research for 5 weeks. I know exactly what users love. So I will tell you what's the MVP. Guess what? We need to put all these people in the room to figure out what is the MVP. And that's not easy. That's why we need help. That's why I want to help each other. I want to help the facilitators of those collaborative workshops. I want to help with Leanception. So that's what happened on Leanception. I like those pictures because it's from the old world, before March. Now we have the same thing on the new world, virtual collaborative rooms, but it's totally doable. I've been doing this since March. So that's what happened on the Leanception. So now let's go in a little bit of detail on the Leanception. Okay, first thing about Leanception, I won't stop in those two. Before something happened, it's either understanding, project portfolio selection, discovery from the double diamond, and then it comes this phase where we need to align and define what's the MVP. On the double diamonds, the define phase. And after that, we align and define what is the MVP. We have a small plan to start with, and then you're going to design and deliver. I'm just simplifying things so you can connect where does Leanception fits on the, on your world. So who participates on the Leanception? You have different types of people that have different perspectives. So it's everybody interested on that initiative. So you get everybody together on a very collaborative workshop because they're from different perspectives and they're trying to find that intersection. So it has to be a collaborative workshop.